Alright, we're gonna talk about the most common pedal building mistakes. I've done them all, and I'll start with some really basic ones. Don't rush it. Just take your time, triple, double check, quadruple check everything you're doing. That's a good way to approach pedal building because a small mistake and your board won't work. So it's really good to take your time and make sure you're following the layout. And that's one of the most common things. So if you have a layout or a schematic, make sure you understand what you're doing. And one of the common mistakes is when you do a Vero board layout. So this is the Vero board. You forget to mirror the layout. So what that means, and you can see it on my live streams and the series I made about building your own very first fast pedal on a Vero board, is when you see the image, you gotta remember to mirror it. When the cuts on the Vero board are shown in the image, that they're here, you actually gotta remember that you need to do it from this way because it's then the board is gonna be flipped. So the components go on this side. So that's a mistake I've done. So I made the cuts in the wrong place and then your Vero board is waste pretty much. Then one really simple thing. Avoid eBay and Amazon, especially the outboard components. Don't get cheap components. They suck and they will cause all kinds of issues. As we can see here, I got these from an old pedal of mine that wasn't working, and you see over there, that's just rolling around there. These are really like flimsy. And so same thing with here, just absolute rubbish. And this one especially, like even this just rolls around here. And then we got a quality jack like this. So yeah, especially with jacks and so on, get good ones. There's gonna be a link in the description where I get mine, and this will save you a lot of headache with your builds. You're not gonna save if you try this in the end. Then I would say one common mistake is when you start doing your own enclosure. So then measuring. You don't measure carefully enough. That's essential to make sure everything fits in the enclosure later. So yeah, do measure carefully because it's not nice when these go to waste and you can't fit the parts in. And then I would say that one common mistake is having wrong component values. So make sure you are getting the right ones before you start your project. And then later on, of course, when you're doing your board, make sure you're putting the right ones in there. And then we get to one other mistake, placing your components in the wrong places. And that happens to me like all the time, but usually it's really fixable. And then in my video about the essential tools and essential components, I tell that that's the reason why you have sockets for certain components, because this would be a chip with 16 legs would be meh. I wouldn't even try to desolder it off the board because so then your whole board is ruined, and that's why sockets. So use sockets. All right, then a really common thing, too thick of a wire. So what you basically want is something like this instead of that. So yeah, 24 AVG is what I use. And then we get to the actual board. So here we go, and I'll show you some common mistakes in here. So bridge between the strips. There's one over there. So no, make sure you don't have any unwanted connections between the strips, and then leaving the legs. So you need to trim and cut these. And there's I tried to make a cold joint, so when you don't heat your soldering iron enough, you're gonna have cold soldered joints, and then your pedal won't be working correctly. And as we can see here, we got two sides of this component. The other side's fine, and this side not good at all. And yeah, there's some not so good soldering in here done just purposefully, but then you can see how it should look like over there. And then on this side we got kind of not so good ones. So yeah, just practice soldering, take a look at the basics and see how it should look like. And that's also a common mistake, not using thin enough of wire. 0.5 is what I use, and then I have a really pointy tip on my soldering iron. So do that. You're not gonna have a good time if you're trying to use a tip like this. You can see the difference there. So that's pretty essential. And of course, some of these components are polarized, so it matters how they're oriented. And that's a common mistake too, like putting it the wrong way around, and then your pedal won't work. So for example, with these electrolytic capacitors, that side is the minus and the other side is the plus, as we can see. There we go. So the side with the gray strip over there with the minus sign, I say, is the minus side. And then the diodes usually also have clear markings on them. And with the LEDs, the other side here on the base is flat and the other side is rounded. So you can tell which way to put them like that. And on the LEDs too, the other leg is longer than the other one. All right, and then let's talk about testing. So it's a good thing to make yourself a little box like this if you are planning to get into making pedals. And another good thing would and actually is a probe. So then you can try and see where the problem is. And you test for continuity, and a good probe, if you learn how to use it, will tell you where the problem might lie when you end up with a non-working pedal. So there we go. And a box like this, really easy to make, saves you a lot of time because you don't have to every time hook these outboard components into the board. You just have 4 leads going from the board into this box, power, ground, in and out, and then this little thing. So a good power source, and this is a really noise-free solution. You can make this yourself and you then just plug it into your test box and you are ready to test your builds. So there we go. And then wires. So we have a selection of colors available. So it's a really good thing to form a practice where, for example, you use every time for the output wire from the board, you use a blue one. For input, you use a green one. I use black for the ground and 9 volts for the power. And one common mistake then, considering the power, is that your power supply is the wrong way around. So with pedals, you have center negative. So you gotta keep that in mind and make sure the polarity is correct. You don't want to fry your pedals up. And I think that's pretty much the common mistakes to avoid as you go along. You build more pedals, you get more comfortable, you get more experience. You're gonna be making a lot more a lot less mistakes. But the first thing I do is, well, remember, don't get cheap components. It's a good thing to start with the kit where all of it is already included. And after that, just practice your soldering. Make sure it looks good and take a look at my video about how to make good soldiers and what they should look like. All right, have fun. I'm off.